Be the Talk, episode 164, featuring Natalie Torres-Haddad. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Natalie Torres-Haddad. Natalie, are you ready to talk?
I'm ready to talk, yes.
Natalie Torres-Haddad is a financial literacy advocate, international award-winning author, and podcast host of Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes. Her activities have been featured in the Huffington Post and the LA Times. Natalie is one of the 4% of Hispanics holding a master's degree in the United States. Natalie Torres-Haddad, welcome to the talk.
Thank you for having me, Nathan. Excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be great because so important. Your talk is called The Foreign Language of Financial Literacy. I love your talk because it really is, unfortunately, if you're not privileged to be in a kind of an advantaged home life where you saw your parents paying the bills or a parent paying the bills and teaching you about money and it doesn't grow on trees and you got to be mindful about it. It can be a foreign language to you. And I'd love to hear more. Take us behind the talk.
Yes, thank you for those comments. Not everyone, most of us don't really realize that we're exposed at a very early age what financial literacy is. And unfortunately, most of us don't really find out till maybe college life or as adults. So that's really what the premises of my talk was explaining the story of what I went through along with what most college graduates, working professionals feel as far as being able to balance their normal life from student life to now working full time and possibly also graduating with six-figure debt and student debt, along with maybe working if you're working right away. So financial literacy really does play with that. And as we saw in part of the TED Talk, I described that over 70% of college graduates feel that they don't even know what financial literacy is.
College graduates.
Yes, college graduates. So imagine for those that don't even have the college education, that means their financial literacy is non-existent. So, and I called it the foreign languages because obviously I speak another language too. But for those that just remember learning English, you had to take the time to learn daily and it wasn't something you would learn in one day. So same thing with financial literacy. It's an evolving language that we need to be cautious about. So that was why I was so fortunate to be able to present that TED Talk.
Yeah. So in other words, we're really starting with 30%. I'm flipping your statistic around. 30%, only 30% of college graduates who are graduating average of not a six-figure job, like maybe the old days in equivalent money, but a six-figure debt. And kind of scratching their head. Only 30% of us are financially literate right there. So it goes downhill from there for sure. Yes, absolutely. And the funny thing is, I got so many people after the talk, especially coming to me afterwards. And my favorite comment was, "You made me cry about financial literacy." And I know what she meant. It touched me because I understood. I was saying we have to be not only passionate about what we learn, but the fact that we have to care that it affects all of us in our community, not just the person who doesn't get it. It's literally everyone in our community. Absolutely. Natalie, one of the really poignant parts of your talk that really brought it home for me, and I want to be sensitive about the way that we talk about this because it is so powerful. And I was, raised in a completely different background, very rural area. And so you mentioned the LA riots back in, I think it was 1992, 91.
92, yep.
Yeah. So I'm getting ready to graduate from high school back at the time. It's amazing how you can insert your own story when you hear the positive trigger of somebody else sharing a milestone. And I was thinking, and I've learned a lot since then about, privileges and advantages and culture and, your environment and all of that stuff. There's so much I learned, but I remember being back at the time and just not understanding the dynamics and hearing other authority figures who are kind of making judgment calls and just so much misunderstanding happening. And basically, the other piece about that is, I mean, you are Hispanic. We had, from my vantage point, we thought it was a different type of race, background kind of thing. obviously a lot of Hispanics in Los Angeles. Take us back to that time before I dig any more of a hole on this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I personally read into that, and your story of why this happened and everything else was juxtaposed against me trying to figure out why it was really happening and not understanding and not being educated about culture issues and background issues. So love to hear your thoughts.
And, I was a little intimidated at first about this, talking about that experience, because I was about 10 years old when all of this was going on. And as a child, you don't understand this, let alone the adults that I was asking questions. No one really understood what was going on because of the frustrations and everything that came with it. And I presented my TED Talk in Davenport, Iowa. So the fact that you said, and it makes sense, and a lot of people came up to me saying, I never would have pictured that or really understand what it felt like being surrounded in our communities that were really affected by that. So what that looked like, and I do a lot of it in my TED Talk, is describing the not just the sense of we no longer have the secure feeling of our own neighborhood, but we also saw the communities of, as far as restaurants, grocery shops, local mom and pop shops that were looted, and a lot of them were burnt to the ground. And so now our city had to rebuild, which takes years, decades actually. There's still a couple locations that never reopened, a mall that never opened up again. And so this is 3 decades more after the effect. And so when I started formulating the talk, my coach was telling me, saying, what made you trigger? What was it that makes you so passionate about advocating for financial literacy? Everyone talks about it, but not necessarily comes from a place where I'm like, the reason why it's because it affects literally everyone in the community. Because if you have a struggling parent, if you have a struggling single family home, if you have someone that is, just graduating from college, they're dealing with all these stress and frustrations that for us during the LA riots, I think was so real that not to say all of a sudden my childhood was gone, but I became aware of something that I never thought I'd be exposed to. And coming from my background, I'm from El Salvador, so Central America, my mom, she's like, wow, we left because of a civil war there, and it was worse where we were at the time. And so I think that's something that really stuck with me. And I thought, well, we need to be able to stand for each other and come together and talk about this subject that most people don't want to talk about, finances, and just what does financial literacy really mean? So that's part of why I wanted to include that. And I don't know if you noticed that in the TED Talk, I didn't use any slides because I thought about using some of those real pictures, but I wanted people to just really visualize my feeling of what that really felt as a kid and the effects it really had, decades after.
Well, you didn't need the slides. You brought us right there. Well, that's my next question. And this is a personal question. How does a 10-year-old girl who immigrated in from El Salvador to get to almost the promised land of safety and security and literally burning down around, how did you find safety? How did you find groundedness, or did you not? Is that part of the toll of what happened those days?
That's a good question. I am a product of my community. So I think part of that, like I said, my security was gone in a different way, but it also, I felt my family, my neighbors, our neighborhood, we still came together. We were frustrated and sad and not really understanding what was going on. But I think that's what allowed me to really see beyond, I guess, my feeling scared or feeling hopeless at the time, you could say. But what it was, my parents are great, the foundation wise. They're like, you know what, there's always something we can do, even if you have no idea what it was. And for me, it was that my mom's like, you can volunteer. And I volunteered at a local food pantry as a kid. And that really did make me see that we might all have struggles. Some people might have it worse. And so, this was a neighborhood too, where people were already struggling to just get by. And so people are losing their jobs, people are losing their homes. And that was the most difficult thing to see, that it can be any of us. And so to go back to your question, I guess, as a 10-year-old, I was always so fortunate enough to be surrounded by neighbors that even if we didn't have a lot, we always had each other, meaning, I remember our neighbors would give us like fruit from their trees. And, we had these great conversations. We used to walk around, the neighborhood, doing nature walks with my grandmother. So,
in South Central LA, you're doing a nature. What does that look like?
In Inglewood, that was the funniest thing because we talk about this and say, so I grew up in a particular part of Inglewood, which is an even smaller part of Inglewood. And the nature walks that consisted for us was, walking on our neighborhoods, going through the streets. Some neighbors had flowers in their yards, and then we walk along the freeway pathways. And mind you, my grandmother, we all came from a place that was very tropical and foresty, and she wanted to instill that with the kids to say, how can I teach them about certain plants, which ones are healthy, which ones, just are more for display. And so those became our nature walks. And my family and I always joke around that because we're big hikers and we live in LA where there are places that you can go have an actual nature walk. So being in those areas, somehow we did it, and getting to know our neighbors' yards. Now I can identify certain plants that are actually edible, which plants are, just for show. So it's interesting.
Talk Universe, we had a little bit of...
Is that me?
No, I don't know, but... Talk Universe, we had a little bit of a bandwidth,
a little connection here,
a little bandwidth piece, and it kind of obscured the brilliance of what Natalie said to answer my question about, and I just want to recap that. I don't want anybody in Talk Universe to miss this. So you migrate into the United States at the age of 10 from El Salvador, from a lush tropical, beautiful paradise. You arrive promptly upon arrival. After some months and years, there is a riot. The entire neighborhood is burned. Everything seems to be gone. The social fabric, what little there might have been, is pretty much destroyed. And I ask Natalie, how does a 10-year-old girl make sense out of all that and put your life back together when all of it burns down? And your answer to me was you gave back.
Yes.
You volunteered. You served at a food pan. I mean, that is just, I'm those of you that are watching the Facebook Live part of this podcast, Talk Universe, you can't see me picking up my jaw off the ground. So powerful to me, your empowered family and what they have instilled in you, that no matter what the people take from me, no matter what looters take from me, no matter what rioters take from me, and even, good people who were very, very frustrated, and some of whom acted in different ways. And by the way, everybody needs to be heard. Everybody needs to be acknowledged in their feeling, just human to human. That's part of why we do the talk. But your family and your values told you to give back, and you gave back, and slowly things started, maybe not coming back together again, but you were centered. And I heard that as a turning point. Do you agree, or was it something else?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually a baby when we migrated here, but being in Inglewood for a few years already, and about, like you said, 10 years old, we live by example. And so my family and my neighbors were the same. They're always about helping each other out. So I appreciate you saying something like that, because it's especially in a time of now where we need to be more compassionate towards people and families that are being, taken apart pretty much. And so, in those times of frustrations and unknown, it's more important to stick together and to be supportive and be compassionate more than anything. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, Talk Universe, if you want to hear more on financial literacy, go watch your talk. I'll tell you how to do that in a few moments. Be the Talk. It's about finding the person behind the talk, and it's about really digging into those things. So we spent a little bit of extra time doing that. I think it's very well worth it. And in a moment, we're going to come right back because it's time for the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with the Blitz Round with Natalie Torres-Haddad. Natalie, are you ready for the Blitz Round?
Yes, I am.
I'm going to ask you a series of either or questions related to the preparation and performance of your talk. Question number 1, were you selected to speak or did you apply?
Both. I was nominated from a few people, and then I had to send my application.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
I'm a blender. Memorizing does not work for me. Had too many bad experiences with that. So I'm a blender.
Did you walk out on stage? Did you have nerves, or were you in the zone, or neither, or both?
Actually, I was totally in the zone. I remember walking down the stairs to the stage and thinking in my head, this is so cool. This is what I've been, dreaming of or praying. So it was a great zone moment. But I had tons of nerves the couple months prior and definitely the week before. It was hard to sleep, all that fun stuff that comes with it. But yeah, in the zone.
What's a tip, technique, or tool that helped you?
Practice where you're going to be standing as far as dimensions. I had the dimensions for how big the rug was going to be, the circle, the red circle. So it allowed me to practice where my space would be and how often I would move, and especially within the light circle as well. So it's 2 circles within the circle.
Yeah, know your placement right there on the stage. We've been enjoying the Blitz Round with Natalie Torres-Haddad, and in just a moment, we're going to be right back with the final word of advice. But before we do, want to let you know where you can go and see this fantastic talk that Natalie gave, The Foreign Language of Financial Literacy. If you need to empower yourself, if you are one of the 70% of us who graduated from college and yet we're not financially literate, you want to check this out. And if you don't want to type that into YouTube, you can visit our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com, and we will have a link right there. As well as you want to connect with Natalie, you can do that at Financially Savvy in 20 minutes.com. Financially Savvy in the number 20 minutes.com. We'll be right back with Natalie Torres-Haddad and the final word of advice. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with Natalie Torres-Haddad. It is time for the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
So the final word of advice is be authentic. That's the best I can say, is be authentic to your story. It shows. I mean, there's moments where I started crying or almost cried. Almost cried on stage. So be authentic.
Natalie Torres-Haddad, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your brilliance with Talk Universe.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for listening to Be The Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.